So Amos Wallace was your father, and he was a really well-known artist. Tell us about who he was.
Well, my dad, he was born in Hoona, and he learned artwork through one of his uncles, and then also with my Uncle Lincoln. And he made a real significant contribution to Tlingit art forms through the middle of the last century, all the way up until his death. He was an active artist, with totem poles, between Fairbanks and New York City. You go through the whole country, you can find artworks by him.
What types of things would we see in places or museums around the country?
Well, if you went to Fairbanks, go to the University of Alaska Fairbanks campus, you'll see a 49-foot totem pole that he carved to commemorate Alaska becoming a state. There's also 2 totem poles that he carved at a place called, it was called Alaska Land, but I believe it's called Pioneer Park right now, and it still stands in downtown Fairbanks. He carved that in the summer of 1967. The whole family went up to be in Fairbanks as he worked for the, it was called the A67 site. It was, a summer-long celebration to, mark the purchase of Alaska from Russia, and one of the main attractions was my father carving 2 totem poles.
And he also has the distinction of appearing on The Tonight Show.
Yeah, he was on the Jack Paar show in 1958. Jack Paar was the original host for The Tonight Show. Dad joked that he'd like to say he was like the very first TV star, Tlingit TV star. And when he was on, he was on The Tonight Show, and then a lot of his buddies from World War II saw him who were living in the East Coast and the Midwest, and they all got on buses and cars and planes, and they all made their way to New York City to visit Dad and watch him work.
Why was he invited onto The Tonight Show?
He was, Dad was hired by a big department store called Abraham and Straus. It was it's a huge department store in Brooklyn, and he carved 2 totem poles in 1958, to commemorate, to mark Alaska that was going to become a state. And the president of Abraham and Straus, the department store, was also on the board of directors for the Brooklyn Children's Museum. So after those totem poles were carved, they were handed over to the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and I recently went there last month just to, every time I go to New York City, I always make my way to Brooklyn to the Children's Museum to see how my dad's totem pole is doing. It's in a great hall. Thousands of kids get to see it every day.
During that time, did your dad have any contemporaries? Were there many Tlingit carvers doing what he was doing?
In the mid-1950s, there weren't that many active, carvers. Several people have given my father credit as helping, maintain the art form, during the, the mid-1950s. 40s, 50s, 60s, there wasn't that many people doing it. And, I don't want to say he kept it alive. A lot of other people did their bit to keep the art form going, but he certainly did his part. You can see his artwork. He has art in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington D.C. He has totem poles in Ohio. He carved a series of totem poles for Disneyland. They're just everywhere.
And he's someone who made a living at this.
Yeah. His he had, he considered himself mainly a fisherman, which he was, 30s and 40s, part-time in the 50s, but, he supported me, mom, dad, the family through his artwork.
And he passed away several years ago.
Yeah, he died in 2004, 8 years ago.
And in 2012, this year, you made a pretty extraordinary donation to Sealaska Heritage Institute.
Yeah, I was getting all his archives together, and I kept finding lots and lots of drawings. Some were very completed drawings, ready to incorporate into a project. Others were just like snippets of ideas, but there were literally several hundred drawings of his that weren't necessarily his portfolio, but it was like his book of ideas several different books of his ideas, and I didn't want that just to languish in my basement anymore. It needed to be out there to be shared. My dad was, a giving person. He was always, anytime somebody needed something, he always gave. So, like, to honor him, I want to give this artwork to Sealaska Heritage Institute so they could incorporate that into projects, into teaching projects.
Did he keep all of his drawings?
He kept lots. There was, our basement flooded. Mom and Dad's basement flooded around 2000, and a lot of his files got damaged and had to be thrown away. And I didn't want any of that to happen with what I had left. So it's here. It's in the archives. It's safe, and generations of people will be able to look at it and learn from it.
Describe some of your favorite drawings that are in that collection.
Well, my favorite one is a killer whale drawing, and I looked at it and I said, I've seen this before. Then I went back to my files and I saw that it was a photograph that I took of a killer whale that he carved for the Smithsonian Institution. It's the drawing that led to the carving of the killer whale, and he made numerous variations on the theme there. My brother, he made a real nice brooch for my mom of the killer whale, and my brother Roger inherited that, and he proudly wore that during celebration. It only comes out during celebration.
It's not just drawings that you donated as part of this collection. What else is in that collection?
In his archives, he was a lifetime member of the Alaska Native Brotherhood, so there's a lot of his papers that had to do with the Alaska Native Brotherhood, and there were hundreds of photographs from his career, from his life. Ed Coons Jr. came up to me at church one day, and he pulled out this picture from his pocket, and it was a photograph of my dad in the Juneau Parade in 1928. Just this priceless, irreplaceable photograph that he just brought to church and whipped out of his pocket when he won first place for his entry in the Juneau Parade in 1928. And then there's photographs of him at work in all the locations that I've mentioned. Photographs of him carving in New York City, in Boston, in Disneyland, and then photographs of all of his artwork, of his monumental artwork that's all around the country.
What do you see most in the drawings in terms of content? What did he draw the most?
Well, I don't know if he drew one thing the most, but he drew a lot of killer whales. I'm a killer whale. Maybe I don't know if he did that in my honor, but I like to think that. Lots of different drawings that you can connect and say, this is the top of the 49-foot totem pole in Fairbanks, or this is the drawing for the panel in Bellingham. This is the drawing that he drew for the Children's Museum in Brooklyn. So it's real neat to be able to see these connect. From this little piece of paper emerged a 49-foot totem pole.
This is a pretty spectacular collection, and you could have given it to any archive in the country. They would have happily taken this. Why did you give it to Sealaska Heritage Institute?
Well, I believe in the mission. I can really see the results of the mission. If I gave it to some archive up in Anchorage, it'd just be there sitting safe, I'm sure, but no one in town would be able to come and see it. And it's real exciting to me that the Walter Soboleff Center is going to be built soon, and my dad's archive is going to be in there, in the center that was named after one of his best friends. And it's hard for me to put in words, but it is a very, very profound, meaningful thing for me and the rest of the family that his artwork will be preserved there and to be able to be shared there.